The Canon R6 versus the Canon R7. What is the correct camera for you? Or is it Canon AE1? It's a wild card. Welcome to the show that we've called You Are My Sunshine, based on the fact that there is a LED faux neon sign behind me that says You Are My Sunshine. And this is the show that we drink peach sparkling water. That's nice. Also, slow zoom. Free presets. Too close. Free presets available to you. If you're interested, there's a link in the description. You can get them. Today I want to talk to you about Canon R6 versus R7. You obviously don't see either in front of me. I'm recording this on the Canon R6. In the past, I've done these videos that here are the reasons that I'm making my choice, and I break those down. Today I want to do a little bit differently, where I actually talk about you and your needs and why you may go to one camera versus the other. My choice, I guess, too long didn't watch, is that I've gone with the Canon R6 for a variety of reasons that I'm going to discuss over the rest of this video. But that is not to say that the Canon R7 is a bad camera by any means. It just ticks some different boxes, and boxes that I don't necessarily work in all of the time. If you're a wildlife shooter, or you like macro photography, and you also do a little bit of wedding photography or a little bit of portrait photography on the side, I would say the Canon R7 is probably the correct tool for you. Whereas if you're on kind of the flip side of that and you don't really do a whole lot of photography of birds in flight or macro objects, then I may suggest that you go with the Canon R6. A few points about the fact that I would say low light performance is maybe one of the things that's on your mind. It's like, how does the low light compare? And quite honestly, it's weirdly comparable. In my test footage, and you can actually, there's a video and you can download these raw files if you want to play around with them. Shooting around ISO 8000 is totally fine in my experience, and in a normal wedding day environment specifically, I rarely find a reason to go above 8000 ISO. Yes, once you get to the maximum ISO, the Canon R7, not so good, but that kind of same goes with the Canon R6. And there's no realistic reason to be pushing ISO kind of beyond that, as long as you're shooting the correct lens for the environment, which usually means a 1.8 prime if you are in a darker space. When it comes to megapixels, check mark for both. Yep. Ergonomics, both of the cameras honestly feel quite good in your hands, and I know that one of the points might be if you do have larger hands and you want a battery grip doesn't yet, at least in what I'm aware of, exist in Canon R7 land. So if you are somebody that's going to be wanting to add a battery grip, I don't know if that's coming. That might be Canon, as you know, tends to maybe leave things out or water features down in order to get you to buy more expensive products. That might be something that they never released an official product for. Does that mean that somebody else maybe might manufacture a third-party one that maybe doesn't hook up to the circuitry but still makes it the same size? Yeah, maybe. For me, personally, I know I was going to say that this was all about you, but for me personally, I don't love the fact that this Canon R3 is this big and has kind of the built-in battery grip. I definitely prefer the size of the Canon R7 and R6. The Canon R7 has a little bit, I would say, of a deeper grip, and then the Canon R6, I don't know if it's just because I've been using mine for 2 years, feels a little bit more, flatter. It's still fine. Really just nickel and diming these cameras at this point. Either of them are going to be totally fine for you when it comes to ergonomics. Button layout, here's where it may get a little bit spicy. Canon R6 has the back aperture dial that you're probably pretty familiar with. And then it also has a back wheel and a front wheel, similar to what you see here in the Canon R3. Back wheel here, this, and then front. And that means you have access to ISO, aperture, and shutter speed very easily on the camera body. You don't have to map something to your control ring of your lens, and I do definitely prefer that, and I think that ergonomically it's a lot better. I am very interested in what Canon has done on the R7, which is the back spinning wheel. If it was a directional pad and you could go left and right and up and down on it, I would really love it. As of right now, or I guess as of the Canon R7 forever, because they're not going to change hardware, there is kind of this circular wheel dial that's kind of where your back thumb is and a joystick in the center of that. And then you get a front wheel to control, put shutter on one, an ISO on the other, and then I usually use a control ring as my aperture. When it comes to the screens and the EVFs and everything, I really have no preference one or the other. Where I do have a preference, and potentially the reason that kind of tipped me, is full frame versus crop sensor. Again, if you're somebody that wants crop sensor and you're looking to get longer reach out of your lenses, the Canon R7 might be for you. For me, as a wedding and portrait shooter, I really love to shoot with really shallow depth of field. I find that it just looks, as a wedding photographer specifically, it makes the scene look a little bit prettier than maybe it is in real life, and I really like that. I also use it absolutely as a tool. Walk into a space and just clutter everywhere. I can make that clutter disappear into something that looks artistic rather than seeing all the detail of it. And that is not to say that you can't get shallow depth of field on the Canon R7, but what it does is that when you put in, say for instance, the 35mm f1.8, when you put that lens on a crop sensor camera, you get a little bit more depth of field because of the cropping and whatnot. I don't want to get into the math of it, but the images do look a little bit different. Another interesting thing to note, if you are interested in doing video with either of these cameras, the R7 tends to have less of that edge wobble that I'm sure you're aware of. And the Canon R6 with the new firmware is getting better, but I don't know if it's completely solved yet, whereas the Canon R7 is a lot closer to just having, I don't know, like that your footage doesn't look weird and you can just kind of handheld and run around. So that's an absolute point to the Canon R7. Lenses, as of right now, you're buying the full frame lenses and you're using them on a crop sensor camera, which I find to be a little bit weird. And I'm really hoping that the crop sensor line really starts to come up for Canon and they start to release some things that could be a professional lens. I feel like Fuji has absolutely done this, that their crop sensor glass is incredible. And I hope that Canon does something similar to that, where it's smaller lenses and they're a little less expensive and they deliver professional quality results. So I'm hoping that that's the case, but I guess we'll all see together. There's also an interesting thing that you can get. So I put a video up on the Viltrox speed booster, which basically takes your full frame lens and makes it closer to a full frame lens on your Canon R7. You can actually use the Canon speed booster as well, and that is better quality. I guess the downside is that you're now spending essentially the cost of a Canon R6 to make your Canon R7 closer to a Canon R6. Yes, it gives you more versatility, but you'll always have to run through an adapter if you do want to kind of get those full frame looking lenses. So what is the correct tool for you? It's kind of what this comes down to. And also cost. If you're in a position where maybe you can get a Canon R7 and you can get something like the 35mm f1.8, maybe that makes sense to do for now rather than getting a Canon R7 and not being able to afford a good lens for it. This all said, there is so much used glass on the market now, EF glass, that you could run through the adapter if you wanted to. So maybe check out, depending on which country you live in, they run different specials, but sometimes you can get cameras that come with an adapter for EF, and you can find those EF lenses very, very inexpensively now because people are all migrating to the RF glass. So my choice, as you know, is the Canon R6. And it comes down to those reasons. They are both very, very similar cameras in the end files that you're going to see. You get a little bit shallower depth of field if you do shoot with prime lenses. Not to say that you can't get shallow depth of field with the Canon R7, but it's just, I guess you get a little bit more with the Canon R6. I'm also not a human being that shoots a whole lot of things that require crop sensor camera or longer lenses. So that's something that was absolutely a consideration for me. So yeah, those are my thoughts on these two cameras. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you. And that's all. Don't forget to get that free preset pack if you're interested. It is for you. This is for you to have. And I'll see you again another time on You Are My Sunshine. See you.